Okay, today in lesson 9.3, our essential question is, how can you record tenths and hundredths as fractions and decimals? Okay, so we already know what tenths and hundredths are, the tenths place, the hundredths place, and we also know how to write that as decimals with a 10 in the fraction with a 10 in the denominator or 100 in the denominator. So we can probably do both fractions and decimals today. Daniel spent a day hiking through a wildlife preserve. During the first hour of the hike, he drank 6/10 liter of water. How many hundredths of a liter did he drink? Okay, so we want to be able to find how many hundredths is the same as 6/10 of a liter. Okay, I know how to represent hundredths in both fraction form, or I could do decimals. I can do both for hundredths. Okay, so we're going to think about 6/10, and we're going to try to find an equivalent, so that means it has to be the exact same amount, fraction with a denominator of 100. Well, we've done this before, so this square is divided up into 10 equal pieces. So to get 6/10, I need to shade 6 out of the 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That means 4 should be empty. So quick shade. Okay, so 6/10. Okay. In order to be equivalent, it has to be the same amount. And so now I'm still going to shade 6 columns. Okay, so I'm going to go down 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It should look exactly the same. The only difference now is that instead of having my square divided up into 10 equal pieces, now I have it divided up into 100. But you can still see the tenths if you think about the columns in the square. Okay. So if I were to count this, well, this would be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 hundredths. Okay. If I were going to record that without the picture, just with the math, okay, if I were to do that, then I know that 6/10, any equivalent fraction for well, any fraction, I have to multiply the top and the bottom by the same thing. Okay. Well, I know that I want to end up with 100 in the denominator, and I have a 10 right now. What can I multiply 10 by to get to 100? Well, 10 times 10 is 100. In order to keep it equivalent, okay, I have to multiply the top, the numerator, by the same thing, which would be a 10. 6 times 10 is 60. Okay, so you can see that I've shown with math and with a picture that 6/10 is equivalent to 60 hundredths. Okay, now that's how I write it as a fraction. Now I'm going to try it as a decimal. Okay, so I'm going to write 6/10 as a decimal. Okay, if I have 6/10, I don't have a whole number in my fraction, so that's 0 in the ones place. Put my decimal down, and then in the tenths place I should have a 6. Do I have any hundredths? No, I'm going to leave it blank where I could put a 0 there. Okay. So, if I read it without the 0, it's read 6/10. If I add the 0, it's read 60 hundredths. From what we've done before, do we know that 6/10 and 60 hundredths are the same amount? Okay. So we can write it in fraction form as 60 hundredths and in decimal form as 60 hundredths. I want to go back to the problem, make sure I did what they asked. They asked me how many hundredths of a liter did he drink. I told him 60 hundredths, and I've told him 60 hundredths in fraction and decimal form, so I'm okay. Okay, down at the bottom it asked me, explain why 6/10 is equivalent to 60 hundredths. Okay, well, I know that there are 10 hundredths, 10 little tiny hundredths, in every tenth. So that means that if I count by tens here, instead of ones, I'm going to get to 60 hundredths and 6/10. So let's write that. There are 10 hundredths in 1/10. So there are 60 hundredths in 6/10. Okay. Okay, now on page 508, we're going to do another problem with Jasmine. It says Jasmine collected 30 hundredths liter of water in a jar during a rainstorm. How many tenths of a liter did she collect? So this time it's kind of like I'm going backwards. This time they want to know how many tenths of a liter, and they're telling me in 30 hundredths. I have hundredths. Okay, so I'm going to find equivalent decimals, are just decimals that name the same amount. You can write 30 hundredths as a decimal that names tenths. Okay, so if I'm going to do that with, if I'm going to turn it to tenths, I can't use the hundredths place. I can only use the tenths place on my chart. Okay, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to write 30 hundredths in my place value chart. So 0 here, decimal point, then 3, and then a 0 in the hundredths. 30 hundredths. We always say the word that's above the last place that's filled. Okay. But in this case, there are no hundredths that you can see. You can see there's a 0 there. Okay. If I were to think about that with a square, like we did in the previous problem, you would notice that there would be 3 full columns and no hundredths in the 4th column filled, because they're all in that first 3. There are 3 full columns. Okay. When there are no hundredths, we can think of the equivalent as to 3 tenths. 30 hundredths is this equivalent to 3 tenths. So we could write this as 0, decimal point, and then 3, which is read as 3 tenths. Okay. Another way, we're going to write the 30 hundredths as a fraction with a denominator of 10 instead of 100. Okay. First, we need to write 30 hundredths as a fraction. Well, 30 hundredths written like this is 30 hundredths. Okay. 30 hundredths written as a fraction is 30 out of 100. Okay. Now that we have it in fraction form in hundredths, we need to turn it into tenths, like our problem asks for, in fraction form. Okay. So we're going to take 30 hundredths, and we need to turn the numerator and the denominator, change it, and divide by the same thing. We know that we want to end up with a 10 in the denominator, okay, and we have 100 right now. Okay, so we're going to think to ourselves, 10 is a common factor of the numerator and the denominator. So in other words, I can divide 100 by 10 to get to 10, and I can divide 30 by 10 with no remainder, so that means that it's 3. Okay, so Jasmine collected 3 tenths, or 3 tenths liter of water. Okay, now I'd like for you to go ahead and complete the share and show on page 508 and 509.